For 8 years, General Daniel Harper hadn't opened his eyes, hadn't spoken a word. Machines kept his body alive, but doctors said the man was gone. His comrades stopped coming. His world grew quiet. Only his daughter kept showing up, and the German shepherd who once saved his life in combat. Everyone said the dog was just reacting to memory, that love couldn't reach a man buried this deep. But one night, long after visiting hours, Emily broke every rule they warned her about and let the canine do what no doctor, no machine, and no protocol ever could. At 2:47 a.m., the dog did something no one could explain, and a man the world had already buried answered back. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe loyalty can wake the unreachable, make sure to subscribe. Colorado Springs woke slowly under a pale winter sky. Thin clouds drifted low over the foothills of the Rockies, dulling the morning light into a muted gray. A cold wind slid through the city streets, quiet but persistent, carrying the smell of pine and snow that never quite fell. Traffic moved without urgency. People went to work. Life continued, as it always did. At the edge of the city, just beyond a row of bare trees and government buildings, stood the Veterans Medical Center, a structure of concrete and glass designed for endurance rather than comfort. It had the look of a place that expected people to stay a long time, some forever. On the third floor, in a wing reserved for long-term neurological care, was room 347. It was a room where nothing ever changed. General Daniel Harper had been lying in the same position for 8 years. He was 61 now, though time had softened him into something ageless. His body remained strong beneath the hospital sheets, broad shoulders, a thick chest that rose and fell with mechanical precision. His hair, once jet black, had turned iron gray at the temples. Deep lines traced the corners of his mouth and eyes, remnants of a life lived outdoors, under harsh suns and harder decisions. To anyone passing by, Daniel Harper looked like a man sleeping deeply. To the medical charts clipped at the foot of his bed, he was something else entirely. Persistent coma, non-responsive, no meaningful neurological recovery expected. 8 years earlier, an IED explosion overseas had thrown him against steel and fire. His helmet had cracked. His brain had swollen. He never woke up. At first, the doctors had been careful with their words. Let's wait. The brain needs time. He's strong. Time passed anyway. Hope thinned into statistics. Statistics hardened into conclusions. Eventually, Daniel Harper was reassigned. Not to another battlefield, but to a category: maintenance care. No physical rehabilitation, no cognitive stimulation. Beyond protocol, comfort, nutrition, monitoring, waiting for a body to stop. The nurses who rotated through room 347 were not cruel. They were efficient. They adjusted feeding tubes, repositioned limbs, recorded vitals, and spoke to Daniel the way people spoke to furniture they respected, but did not expect to answer. Vitals stable. No change. Same as yesterday. For years, no one argued, except one person. Emily Harper came every Saturday. She arrived just after 10 in the morning, always wearing the same dark wool coat, the sleeves slightly too long for her arms. She was 29, tall and slender, with chestnut brown hair usually tied back in a low, practical knot. Her face carried a softness that made people underestimate her, until they looked closer and noticed the quiet resolve in her eyes. Emily had been that kind of child, the observant one, the listener. Growing up on military bases had taught her to adapt quickly, to stay calm when orders changed, and people disappeared without explanation. Her mother had died when Emily was 17, an illness that moved faster than anyone expected. After that, something in Emily settled into stillness. She didn't raise her voice often. She didn't dramatize pain. She endured. Emily worked as an elementary school teacher in a small district south of the city. Children trusted her instinctively. Adults often mistook her patience for weakness. They were wrong. Every Saturday, Emily parked in the same spot, signed in at the front desk, and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The nurses knew her by name now. Some smiled, some avoided eye contact. More than once, someone had gently suggested she take a break. 8 years is a long time, they said. You're allowed to move on. Emily never argued. She simply nodded, walked into room 347, and sat beside her father. She talked to him about the weather, about her students, about the mountains changing color in the fall. She spoke, as if he were listening. But Emily was never alone. Lying beneath the bed, his body aligned perfectly with Daniel's, was Rex. Rex was a retired German Shepherd K9, nearly 10 years old, with a coat of deep black and weathered tan that had faded slightly around the muzzle. His ears still stood tall, though one bore a thin scar near the base, a reminder of shrapnel and chaos long past. His eyes were amber, steady, intelligent, and alert in a way that never fully relaxed. Even in rest, Rex was working. He had served alongside Daniel Harper for 6 years overseas. Bomb detection, perimeter security, search and extraction. They had moved as a unit, trusting each other in places where hesitation meant death. When Daniel was injured, Rex had been the first to reach him. When Daniel was flown home, Rex stopped eating. After months of failed adoption attempts and behavioral evaluations, a military handler made an exception. Rex was officially retired and unofficially reassigned to Daniel Harper. Now, Rex followed Emily everywhere. He walked calmly through hospital halls, lay silently under the bed, and never barked, never paced, never slept deeply. He listened. Hospital policy technically forbade animals in patient rooms, but rules softened over time. Staff stopped enforcing what didn't cause problems, and Rex somehow never caused any, except one. On a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Nurse Lily Moreno noticed something odd. Lily was 23, fresh out of nursing school, with dark curls pulled into a messy bun, and an earnestness that hadn't yet been worn down by repetition. She had chosen long-term care deliberately, believing patience mattered more than adrenaline. Room 347 was on her assigned route. She entered with a clipboard tucked under her arm, her movements careful, respectful. Rex lifted his head slightly as she approached, eyes tracking her, not hostile, but alert. The EEG monitor beside the bed hummed softly, lines scrolling in familiar patterns. Then the alarm shut off. The room fell into a different kind of quiet. Rex's chest vibrated with a low sound, not a growl of warning, but something deeper, controlled, focused. Lily froze. She watched as Rex shifted his weight, pressing closer to Daniel's side. His ears angled forward, his eyes locked onto Daniel's face. The monitor flickered. Lily's breath caught. The alarm remained silent, but the lines on the screen changed, subtly, briefly, before settling again. Rex relaxed. Lily swallowed hard and wrote nothing on her chart. That night, she checked the logs. The system showed no alert, no anomaly, no reason for concern, but Lily had seen it, and she could not explain why the dog always seemed to know before the machine did. Saturday came again. Emily sat beside her father, Rex at her feet, the room unchanged. Outside, snow had begun to fall, light, tentative, dusting the windowsill without commitment. Emily reached for Daniel's hand. "Hi, Dad," she said, softly. Rex lifted his head. The room remained silent. But for the first time in a long while, someone noticed that silence didn't feel empty. The denial came quietly, the way institutional decisions often do. Emily Harper stood at the nurse's station on the 3rd floor, hands folded in front of her coat, listening as the charge nurse read from a laminated policy sheet. The words were practiced, almost gentle: infection control, patient safety, hospital regulations. Animals were not permitted in patient rooms except under specific, pre-approved therapeutic programs. Rex, no matter how calm or trained, did not qualify. Emily nodded. She always nodded. She had learned long ago that arguing rarely moved systems built on procedure. Still, something in her chest tightened. Not anger, exactly, but a familiar ache. Rex sat at her side, spine straight, head level with her knee, eyes forward. He did not look at the nurse. He did not react. He simply waited, the way he had waited in deserts and alleys and shattered streets for commands that never came too early. "I understand," Emily said, her voice even. "Then I'll visit, alone." She turned toward room 347, already preparing herself for the quiet. Behind her, Rex shifted. Not much, just enough for the nurse to notice the faint sound in his throat, a low, steady vibration that wasn't a growl and wasn't a whine. The nurse frowned, then waved it off. Emily did not turn around. She did not see Rex's ears angle toward the corridor, or the way his eyes tracked something beyond the reach of human senses. Inside room 347, the air felt colder than the hallway. The monitors hummed. Daniel Harper lay exactly as he always had, his chest rising and falling with assisted regularity. Emily pulled the chair close and sat, resting her bag on the floor. She spoke softly, telling him about the snow that had finally fallen overnight, about a student who had learned to read aloud without shaking. Her voice moved through the room and found no answer. Outside, Rex waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The heart monitor ticked along at its baseline, unremarkable. Emily reached for Daniel's hand. His skin was warm, familiar. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the antiseptic smell of the room, the quiet weight of 8 years pressing in from all sides. Then the numbers changed, not dramatically, not enough to trigger an alarm, just a slight elevation in heart rate, a gentle shift that might have been dismissed as coincidence. Emily noticed because she had been watching for years. She looked up, then down at Daniel's face. Nothing. No twitch. No visible response. The door creaked. Rex slipped inside. He did not rush. He did not wag his tail or sniff the equipment. He moved with the deliberate care of a soldier entering unfamiliar terrain, stepping lightly until he reached the bed. Then he lay down, folding himself neatly beneath it, his body aligned with Daniel's. The vibration in his chest ceased. He exhaled slowly. The heart rate climbed again. 2 beats, then 3. Emily's breath caught. She did not move. She did not speak. She watched the monitor and felt something cold and electric travel up her spine. Rex shifted once more, lifting his head just enough to rest it against the edge of the mattress. Carefully, reverently, he placed his muzzle on Daniel's hand. He did not lick. He did not whine. He did not bark. He listened. The room changed. Not in a way the machines could chart, but in a way Emily felt immediately. The silence grew dense, attentive, as if something had leaned forward to hear better. Daniel's fingers remained still, but the muscles beneath the skin tightened almost imperceptibly. The heart rate steadied at its new level and held. Emily swallowed hard. She remembered another silence, years ago, broken by fire. The convoy had been moving through a narrow pass, sunlight glaring off metal and dust. Daniel Harper had been in the lead vehicle, scanning rooftops and windows, his voice calm over the radio. Rex had been beside him, alert but relaxed, tail low, ears tracking the wind. Then the explosion came, violent, sudden, a sound that erased thought. Emily had heard the story later, pieced together from reports and fragments. How the vehicle had ignited, how shrapnel had torn through steel, how Rex had been thrown clear and scrambled back without hesitation, ignoring commands shouted from behind. How he had dragged Daniel by the sleeve of his uniform, pulling him inch by inch away from the burning wreckage while rounds cracked overhead. How Rex had stood over him afterward, blood on his fur, refusing to let medics approach until Daniel was secured. Emily had been 19 when she learned that her father was alive but unreachable. Rex had been there, then too. The memory settled over her now, heavy and vivid. A soft knock came at the door. Dr. Samuel Caldwell stood in the doorway, hands folded behind his back. He was in his late 60s, tall but slightly stooped, with silver hair combed neatly to one side, and eyes that had seen too many wars to be easily impressed. His white coat hung loosely on his frame. Before medicine, he had been a military neurologist. Before that, a field surgeon. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who did not need to raise his voice to be heard. His gaze went first to the monitor, then to Rex. Caldwell did not speak immediately. He watched the dog, the man in the bed, the subtle interplay between them. He stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. "You shouldn't be here," he said at last, not unkindly. Rex did not look at him. "But," Caldwell continued, "neither should that heart rate be doing what it's doing." Emily stood slowly. "I asked permission," she said. "They said no." Caldwell nodded once. "They would." He moved closer to the bed, studying Daniel's face, then the hand beneath Rex's muzzle. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in skepticism, but concentration. He checked the monitor again, then glanced at Emily. "How long does this happen?" he asked. "Every time," Emily said. "Only when Rex is near." Caldwell exhaled through his nose. "Dogs like him," he said quietly, "were trained to read men before machines ever could. Breath patterns, muscle tension, fear, intent." He paused, then added, "And sometimes what the brain remembers isn't something we know how to measure." Rex shifted, pressing his head more firmly into Daniel's hand. The heart rate ticked up another beat. Caldwell's jaw tightened. He straightened, eyes thoughtful. "This doesn't break any alarms," he said, "which means it won't break any rules on paper." Emily understood immediately. She nodded. Caldwell turned to leave, then stopped. 10 minutes, he said without looking back. "Then the dog goes." When the door closed, Emily sank back into her chair, heart racing. She watched Rex and Daniel, afraid to blink. Rex remained perfectly still, his breathing slow, synchronized. For those 10 minutes, the room did not feel like a place where people waited to disappear. When Caldwell returned, the monitor had settled, but not returned to baseline. Rex lifted his head as the door opened. Slowly, carefully, he withdrew from the bed and moved to Emily's side. He sat, posture straight, eyes calm. The rules had not changed. But something else had. Emily did not sleep much after the incident with the heart monitor. Not because she was afraid, but because her mind would not stop replaying the image of Rex's head resting on her father's hand. The number shifting in quiet defiance of 8 years of certainty. By Monday morning, She stopped pretending it had been coincidence. She began with something simple. Emily had always hated the sound of her own recorded voice. It felt thinner, less steady than it did inside her chest. But on Tuesday evening, sitting alone at her kitchen table while Rex lay at her feet, she opened a recording app on her phone and pressed record anyway. Her apartment was small, neat to the point of austerity. Teaching papers were stacked by subject, not date. Grief had taught her control early. "Hi, Dad," she said into the phone, awkward at first. "It's Emily." Her voice wavered, then steadied. She talked about ordinary things. The way he used to wake her up for school by whistling instead of calling her name. How he burned pancakes every Sunday, but insisted they tasted better that way. She talked about the first time he let her sit in the front seat of his truck, how her feet couldn't reach the floor and she felt like she was flying. When she finished, Rex lifted his head. His ears were forward, focused. Emily noticed her hands were shaking. The next Saturday, she came prepared. She waited until the room was quiet, until the nurses had finished their rounds. Rex was allowed in again, unofficially, carefully, with Dr. Caldwell's silent consent. Emily sat beside the bed and placed her phone on the small table near Daniel's shoulder. Rex lay beneath the bed, as always, but this time his body was tense, muscles coiled beneath his fur. Emily pressed play. Her voice filled the room, softer than she remembered, layered with memory. She watched Daniel's face, searching for movement. There was none, but the monitor ticked upward, just slightly. Rex lifted his head, ears erect, eyes locked on Daniel, as if waiting for a command that hadn't yet arrived. Encouraged, Emily expanded. She downloaded ambient recordings, wind tearing through narrow streets, distant explosions, the metallic clatter of boots on gravel. Sounds Daniel had lived inside for decades. When she played them, Rex reacted instantly. His posture shifted from rest to alert. His tail stilled. His breathing slowed into the measured rhythm of training. Emily felt a chill move through her arms. This wasn't memory. This was recognition. The third recording was harder. Emily hesitated before pressing play, her thumb hovering. She had found the file buried deep in an old external drive, a compilation of K-9 training commands Daniel had recorded years ago for a new unit overseas. His voice was younger then, sharper, calm in a way that only came from authority earned the hard way. "Rex," Daniel's voice said from the phone. "Heel, eyes forward." Rex stood, not abruptly, smoothly. His ears snapped forward, body aligning toward the bed. Emily's breath caught as she watched him take one careful step closer, his gaze never leaving Daniel's face. The monitor changed again. Emily swallowed, her heart pounding. She scrolled to another clip, one she hadn't planned to play yet. She didn't know why she chose it. Instinct, maybe, or desperation. "Rex," Daniel's recorded voice said, clear and commanding. "Protect the left flank." Rex moved. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He repositioned himself, angling his body slightly to the left side of the bed, placing himself between Daniel and an invisible threat. His muscles tightened, ready, waiting. Emily leaned forward. Daniel's hand twitched. It was small, almost invisible. A tightening of fingers against the sheet, brief and uncertain. But it happened again, just enough to pull fabric into a shallow crease. Emily covered her mouth. Rex froze, eyes flicking to Daniel's hand. He lowered his head slowly and pressed his nose against Daniel's knuckles, breathing in deeply. The room felt charged, as if something long dormant had stirred and was testing the air. Emily stopped the recording. Her hands were trembling too badly to continue. She sat there, silent, afraid that sound itself might undo what had just happened. When Dr. Caldwell reviewed the monitor logs later, he said nothing at first. He studied the data, then looked at Emily over the rims of his glasses. "You didn't imagine that," he said quietly. Something inside Emily loosened for the first time in years, but Rex paid a price. Emily noticed it that night when she poured his food into the metal bowl. Rex sniffed it once, then turned away. He lay near the door instead, restless, eyes tracking shadows. When Emily coaxed him gently, he didn't respond. He slept in fragments, waking at every sound. The pattern continued. Rex ate only after visiting the hospital. If Emily skipped a day, he refused food entirely. His once glossy coat dulled slightly. His breathing grew shallow during sleep. Emily recognized the signs from her father's old notes. Operational stress, hypervigilance, mission fixation, PTSD. She sat on the floor beside Rex one evening, her back against the couch, and rested her hand on his shoulder. "You think he's still working, don't you?" she whispered. Rex did not look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the door. At the hospital, the recordings became routine. Emily structured them carefully now. Personal memories first, then environmental sounds, then training commands. Rex responded every time, ears up, eyes sharp. Daniel's heart rate followed, subtle, consistent. The staff began to notice, even those who pretended not to. Nurse Lily lingered longer during rounds. She started charting the changes, quietly, without commentary. Once, Emily caught her watching Rex with something like awe. "He knows," Lily said softly. "Before anyone else does." Dr. Caldwell grew thoughtful. He stopped dismissing questions. He began asking them. Still, no alarm sounded. No grand awakening followed. Daniel did not open his eyes. His fingers did not curl again that day. The system could still explain everything away, but Emily knew better. On Thursday afternoon, as she packed away her phone, Rex finally relaxed. He lay down, head resting against the bed frame, breathing slow and deep. Daniel's heart rate returned to baseline, steady and calm. The room settled back into stillness, but it was no longer empty. The notice arrived on a Thursday morning, printed on stiff hospital letterhead, and slid into Emily's hand with practiced neutrality. The charge nurse did not meet her eyes when she delivered it. She didn't need to. Emily had learned, over years of classrooms and hospitals, that when institutions spoke softly, they were usually saying something final. Patient Daniel Harper was scheduled for transfer. The words blurred for a moment before settling into meaning. The hospital cited budget reallocations, long-term prognosis, and the recommendation of the insurance board. Daniel would be moved within 2 weeks to a lower-cost facility on the outskirts of the state, one designed for custodial care, not observation, not experimentation, not hope. Emily stood very still in the hallway, Rex sitting close at her heel. She felt the familiar tightening behind her ribs, the instinct to go quiet and endure. But something had shifted in her over the past weeks. Silence no longer felt like patience. It felt like surrender. She requested a meeting. They scheduled it for the following Monday in a windowless conference room on the second floor. When Emily entered, she found 3 people waiting for her. Karen Whitfield, the hospital's care coordination director, sat at the head of the table. She was a woman in her 50s, sharply dressed, posture immaculate, her expression carefully sympathetic in the way people learned when they delivered bad news often. To her right sat Dr. Alan Price, an insurance medical reviewer with narrow shoulders and eyes that rarely left his tablet. To her left was Dr. Caldwell, quieter than usual, his hands folded as if in restraint. Rex was not allowed in the room. Emily took the chair opposite them and placed her phone on the table. "I'm requesting a delay," she said, her voice steady despite the pulse in her ears. "There have been changes." Karen inclined her head. "We've reviewed the chart. There is no documented neurological recovery." Emily tapped her phone and slid it forward. "Then review this." She played the videos. Rex responding to commands. Daniel's heart rate shifting in real time. The moment his fingers pulled the sheet inward, small but unmistakable. She watched their faces as the footage unfolded. Dr. Price's expression did not change. Karen's softened briefly before returning to professional concern. Dr. Price spoke first. "These are anecdotal responses. Emotional stimuli can affect autonomic systems without indicating consciousness." Emily leaned forward. "So you're saying none of this matters?" "I'm saying," he replied, "that emotion is not medical evidence." The words landed heavily in the room. Dr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "With respect," he said, "what we're seeing may fall outside traditional metrics." Karen raised a hand gently. "Samuel, we understand your interest, but the hospital cannot justify extended care based on unproven methods." Emily's fingers curled against the table. She thought of Rex refusing food, of the way Daniel's heart followed his presence like a compass needle. She thought of the word unproven and how often it had been used to end conversations before they began. She straightened. "Then let me assume the risk," she said. The room went quiet. "I'll sign the waiver," Emily continued. "Full legal responsibility. I'm asking for permission to bring Rex into the room for 30 minutes a day. No equipment changes, no staff involvement beyond observation. If nothing changes, you proceed with the transfer." Karen studied her carefully now. "And if something goes wrong?" Emily met her gaze. "Then it's on me." Dr. Price frowned. "This is highly irregular." "So is moving a man who's showing response," Emily said. There was a long pause. Finally, Karen nodded once. 30 minutes, supervised. No recording devices beyond what's already approved. Emily exhaled slowly. It was not a victory, but it was time. Word traveled quickly through the long-term care wing. Staff whispered. Some shook their heads. Others watched with curiosity. A few, quietly, with hope. One of them was Margaret Liu. Margaret was in her early 40s, petite, with tired eyes and hands that never seemed to stop fidgeting. Her husband Thomas had been in a coma for 3 years following a stroke. She had spoken to him every day at first, then less often, worn down by silence. But she noticed Emily now, how she talked, how the dog listened, how the room felt different afterward. On Tuesday afternoon, Margaret pulled a chair close to Thomas's bed and spoke. Not prayers, not pleas, just memories. She talked about their first apartment, the leaky sink, the cat they'd rescued and lost. The nurse on duty, skeptical but kind, noted a slight change in Thomas's breathing pattern. By the end of the week, 2 families were talking to their loved ones again. Emily didn't know this yet. She was focused on her own narrow window. The first official session began under observation. Rex entered the room calmly, as if he understood the weight of permission. He took his place beside Daniel, posture alert but restrained. Emily spoke softly, guiding the session as she had practiced. Rex responded. Daniel's heart followed. 30 minutes passed too quickly. When time was up, Rex left without resistance. Emily stayed behind, hands trembling with the effort of holding herself together. That night, Rex ate. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Emily sat on the kitchen floor and watched him chew slowly, deliberately, as if reassured that the mission had not been taken from him entirely. The system had not changed its mind. But cracks had begun to form. The storm arrived without warning, the kind that swallowed the city whole. Rain hammered the windows of the Veterans Medical Center, blurring the lights of Colorado Springs into long, trembling streaks. Thunder rolled low and heavy, shaking the glass as if the mountains themselves were shifting in their sleep. The night staff moved faster than usual, voices hushed, footsteps echoing down polished corridors that smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet wool. Emily Harper had stayed late. She sat beside her father's bed with her coat still on, damp at the shoulders, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Rex lay beneath the bed, but he was not resting. His body was rigid, muscles drawn tight beneath his fur, ears angled forward in sharp attention. He had been restless since the storm began, pacing in small, controlled circles before settling back into position, eyes fixed on Daniel Harper's still form. The EEG monitor hummed softly beside the bed, its steady rhythm a sound Emily had learned to live with. She watched the lines rise and fall, familiar and unremarkable. 30 minutes. That was all they were allowed. The clock on the wall ticked toward the end of their window. Thunder cracked directly overhead. Rex lifted his head. Emily felt it before she saw it. The change in the air, the way the room seemed to draw inward. Rex stood slowly, deliberately, as if obeying an order only he could hear. He did not bark. He did not growl. Instead, he threw his head back and let out a single, long howl. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. It was a sound of recognition. The howl cut through the room, through the storm, through 8 years of silence, and then it stopped as abruptly as it began. Rex lowered his head again, breathing hard, his tail trembling just enough for Emily to notice. The EEG monitor spiked. Emily surged to her feet, heart slamming against her ribs. The lines on the screen shifted sharply, breaking patterns she had memorized. Numbers climbed. New rhythms appeared, erratic, brief, undeniable. The machine emitted a low, alert tone, not an alarm, but something close enough to make her breath catch. She reached for her father's hand. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the rain. "If you can hear me." Her fingers closed around his, warm and familiar and terrifying in their stillness. "Please," she said, the word breaking despite her effort to stay calm. "If you're in there, squeeze my hand." For a moment, nothing happened. The storm raged on outside. The monitor continued its strange, uneven dance. Emily felt the weight of every warning she had ever been given press down on her at once. Don't hope, don't project, don't break yourself on something you can't change. Then Daniel Harper's fingers tightened. Not a twitch, not a reflex, a squeeze, clear, measured, intentional. Emily gasped, a sound torn from her chest before she could stop it. She squeezed back, gently, afraid of shattering the moment if she moved too fast. "Again," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Please, just once more." Daniel squeezed her hand again. Rex moved instantly. He stepped forward and pressed his forehead against Daniel's knuckles, eyes closed, tail quivering in short, restrained movements. He did not bark. He did not howl again. He simply stayed, as if anchoring something fragile and newly returned. Emily hit the call button. Within minutes, the room filled with motion. Nurses rushed in, raincoats abandoned at the door. Dr. Caldwell arrived breathless, his usual composure replaced by sharp urgency. Behind him came a man Emily had not seen in years. Colonel Marcus Reed stepped into the room and stopped. He was in his late 70s, tall despite a slight stoop, his frame lean and angular beneath a dark overcoat. His hair was white and cropped short, his face weathered by sun and wind and long deployments. His eyes, clear, steel gray, took in the scene in a single sweep: the monitor, the dog, the man in the bed. Marcus Reed had been Daniel Harper's military physician during his final deployment. Before retirement, he had served as a battlefield surgeon, the kind who trusted instinct as much as instruments. He had believed Daniel was still there when others had stopped believing, and he had said so once before being quietly ignored. Emily looked at him, tears streaking her face. "He squeezed my hand," she said, the words tumbling out. "Twice." Reed moved to the bedside without hesitation. He placed 2 fingers on Daniel's wrist, feeling for rhythm, for response, for life that answered back. He watched the EEG, then looked at Rex, who met his gaze calmly. "I know that sound," Reed said softly. "Dogs don't call like that unless they're calling someone home." He leaned closer to Daniel. "Danny," he said, voice low, familiar. "If you can hear me, do it again." Daniel's fingers tightened. The room went silent. Someone swore under their breath. A nurse covered her mouth. Dr. Caldwell stared at the monitor, then at Emily, his eyes wide with something that looked very much like awe. Reed straightened slowly. "He's conscious," he said. "Not fully, but he's here." No one argued. They ran tests through the storm. EEG readings printed in long, curling sheets of paper, marked with anomalies no one could dismiss. Orders were given. Calls were made. The system for once scrambled to catch up with reality. Through it all, Rex stayed pressed close, his body a steady presence against the chaos. When the storm finally began to fade, the rain easing into a whisper, Emily sat back down beside her father. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, but she did not let go of his hand. Daniel did not squeeze again, but he did not let go either. The call without words had been answered. Weeks passed in a rhythm no one at the Veterans Medical Center had expected to learn. Not the dramatic rush of miracles, not the cinematic moment people imagined when they spoke about awakenings, but something slower, steadier, and far more fragile. Recovery moved in inches, in breaths, in pauses long enough to make everyone doubt again, until the next small sign arrived. Daniel Harper did not wake all at once. At first, it was consistency. His responses no longer appeared only once, then vanished into silence. They returned, again and again, squeezes on command, eye movement that followed sound, EEG patterns that no longer flickered like accidents, but formed recognizable arcs of activity. Consciousness, the neurologist said carefully, was present, but incomplete. Emily learned to live inside that uncertainty. She was there every morning before work and every evening after. Her hair, once always neat, fell loose now, dark strands escaping her tie. Sleep had left soft shadows beneath her eyes, but something else had replaced the exhaustion she had carried for years. Purpose, sharp and undeniable. Rex adapted faster than anyone. The German shepherd aged with quiet dignity, his muzzle grayer now, his movements slower but deliberate. When he entered the room, he did not seek reassurance. He assumed responsibility. He positioned himself near Daniel's left side, exactly as he had been trained, head level with the bed, ears tracking every sound. When Daniel's attention drifted, Rex shifted closer, grounding him. When the machines grew loud, Rex stayed still. The medical staff stopped pretending this was coincidence. Dr. Samuel Caldwell no longer spoke in hypotheticals. He charted what he saw. Other neurologists began to observe. One of them, Dr. Elaine Foster, a compact woman in her 40s with cropped auburn hair and an analytical calm sharpened by years in trauma units, studied the sessions without preconceptions. She did not smile easily. When she did, it meant something had changed. "This isn't stimulus alone," she said one afternoon, watching Daniel's eyes track Rex's movement. "It's relational anchoring." No one argued. The breakthrough came quietly. It was early morning, the light outside pale and cool, the storm long gone. Emily sat by the bed, Rex at her feet. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee from the nurse's station. Emily was telling Daniel about nothing important, about a child in her class who had finally stopped hiding under desks during loud noises, about the way the mountains looked dusted with snow again. Rex lifted his head. Emily stopped speaking. Daniel's eyelids fluttered. At first, Emily thought it was reflex, the kind she had learned not to chase. Then it happened again, slower, intentional. His eyes opened a fraction, then closed, then opened wider. Emily froze. Daniel Harper opened his eyes. They were unfocused at first, clouded by years of darkness, moving without direction. His breathing changed, shallow and uneven, as if the simple act of awareness required effort. Emily leaned forward, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe too loudly. Rex stepped closer. The moment Daniel's eyes found him, everything else seemed to fall away. The gaze sharpened. Recognition moved across Daniel's face. Not confusion, not fear, but something older and deeper. His eyes followed Rex as the dog shifted, tail wagging once, restrained but unmistakable. A sound escaped Daniel's throat. Not a word, a breath shaped by intention. Rex pressed his head gently against Daniel's arm. Emily's hands shook violently now. "Dad," she whispered, "it's me." Daniel's eyes moved again. This time, they found her. Tears slid down Emily's face before she realized they had started. She laughed and sobbed at once, gripping the edge of the bed to stay upright. Daniel's lips moved, struggling against muscles that had forgotten how to obey. "Emily," he breathed, the sound barely audible. She nodded furiously. "I'm here! I'm right here!" His eyes closed briefly, then opened again. "My girl," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here." The room filled within minutes. Doctors, nurses, therapists, some running, some walking carefully, as if sudden movement might undo what was happening. Rex did not move from Daniel's side. He watched them all with steady patience, as if guarding the moment itself. Colonel Marcus Reed arrived shortly after, coat still unbuttoned, hair damp from the cold air outside. He stood at the foot of the bed, silent, his jaw tight. When Daniel's eyes flicked toward him, recognition sparked again. Reed nodded once. No words were necessary. Daniel did not sit up. He did not speak again that day. Consciousness returned in waves, not floods. By afternoon, exhaustion claimed him. His eyes closed, his breathing steadied, but this time the machines told a different story. He was sleeping, not disappearing. The days that followed were filled with firsts that would have seemed impossibly small to anyone else. Daniel responding to his name consistently, turning his head toward sound, squeezing Emily's hand when she asked. Each milestone was documented, verified, witnessed. Rex was there for all of it. The hospital board moved quickly once denial was no longer an option. Funding appeared. Committees formed. A pilot program was announced under a careful, clinical title that could not quite contain what it represented: animal-assisted consciousness recovery. Rex was formally recognized, not as a visitor, not as an exception, but as a therapeutic partner. The ceremony was small, held in the rehabilitation wing. Rex sat calmly as a service vest was placed over his shoulders, embroidered with his name and unit. He did not react to the applause. He simply looked toward Daniel, who watched from his bed, eyes bright with pride. Emily made her decision shortly after. She resigned from her teaching position with a letter that surprised no one who had watched her over the past months. The hospital offered her a role she had not imagined before: coordinating family involvement in the new program, training relatives to communicate, to observe, to persist without breaking themselves. She accepted. On a quiet afternoon weeks later, Emily sat beside her father, holding his hand, while Rex slept nearby, finally at ease. Daniel's speech was still slow, his movements limited, but his eyes were clear, present. "You didn't leave," he said, the words careful but certain. Emily smiled through tears she no longer tried to hide. Neither did he. Daniel looked at Rex, then back at his daughter. "Good team," he whispered. Outside, the city moved on as it always had. Inside room 347, life had returned. Sometimes the world decides too quickly that someone is gone. A chart is filled out. A box is checked. Life moves forward. But this story reminds us of something simple and powerful. Consciousness does not always disappear. Hope does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits quietly for someone who is willing to stay. In our daily lives, we all know someone who feels unseen, someone who is tired, someone who has been written off too soon. And often, the greatest act of love is not fixing them or saving them, but refusing to walk away. Emily stayed. Rex stayed. And because they did, a man found his way back. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe that love, loyalty, and patience still matter in this world, please subscribe to the channel so these stories can keep reaching those who need them. May God bless you and your family. May He watch over those who are waiting, those who are hurting, and those who refuse to give up. If you are praying for healing, for strength, or for someone to come back to you, type Amen in the comments. You are not alone.